"Sir, she put something in your drink," the hungry girl warned the businessman. Michael Thompson was about to toast with Jessica when he felt a hesitant touch on his arm. He turned his head and saw a thin girl, about 10 years old, wearing worn-out clothes and with wide, worried eyes. "Sir, she put something in your drink," the child whispered, discreetly pointing to the wine glass on the table. Jessica, who had been smiling seductively until then, turned pale as a sheet. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to maintain her composure, but the forced smile couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Michael asked, looking back and forth between the girl and Jessica. The girl swallowed hard, clearly nervous about disturbing such well-dressed people in the elegant restaurant. "I saw her put a white powder in your glass when you went to the restroom. She looked around to see if anyone was watching, but I was near the back table." Michael's stomach twisted. He had only known Jessica for 3 weeks since she had approached him at a business conference. There was something about her that fascinated him, a mix of elegance and mystery that drew him in like a magnet. "This is ridiculous," Jessica exclaimed, abruptly standing up. "This girl must be hungry and making up stories to get food." But Michael noticed something off in Jessica's voice, a higher pitch, a tension he'd never heard before. He looked back at the girl, who stood there trembling but determined. "What's your name?" Michael asked gently. "Emma, sir. I'm sorry for bothering you, but I really saw it. My mom always told me to speak up if I see something wrong happening to someone." Michael studied the girl's face. There was a sincerity in her eyes that convinced him more than any argument. He picked up the wine glass and held it up to the light. At the bottom, he could make out a faint, whitish residue he hadn't noticed before. "Jessica, care to explain?" "This?" His voice was calm, but there was a coldness she recognized immediately. "Michael, you're not going to believe some street kid over me, are you?" Jessica tried to laugh, but it came out forced and desperate. The tension in the restaurant was palpable. Other diners began glancing their way, curious about the unusual scene. Michael felt torn between the woman he had started to fall for and the unknown child who had appeared out of nowhere. "Emma, what were you doing here in the restaurant?" Michael asked, still processing the situation. "My mom works in the kitchen here, sir. Sometimes she brings me when she has no one to leave me with. I sit quietly in the back, but today I came to get a glass of water and saw the lady do it." Jessica took a deep breath, as if making a difficult decision. "Fine, Michael. Maybe I should just leave. You clearly don't trust me," she said, grabbing her purse abruptly. "No, Jessica, sit down, please. Let's clear this up right now." Michael held her arm firmly, but not harshly. Emma remained by the table, as if sensing her presence was crucial at that moment. Her eyes darted between Michael and Jessica, catching every nuance of the tension between them. "Emma, are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" Michael asked again. "Yes, sir. She took a little bag from her purse, looked around, and poured the powder into your glass. Then she stirred it with her finger and wiped it on her skirt." Michael glanced at Jessica's skirt and noticed a small damp stain that could easily have gone unnoticed. His heart began to race, not from passion but from a mix of anger and disappointment. "Jessica, I need you to tell me the truth. What was in that glass?" She remained silent for long seconds, her eyes fixed on the table. When she finally looked up, tears were streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of innocence. "It was just a headache remedy," she whispered, but her voice lacked any conviction. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, "Headache remedy?" repeated Michael, disbelief evident in his voice. "Why would you put medicine in my drink?" Emma, who had stayed quiet during the conversation, took a small step forward. "Sir, my mother has been a cook here for 5 years. She taught me that headache medicine isn't a white powder like that, and that we should never put medicine in someone else's food or drink without them knowing." The child's simple logic hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He looked at Jessica again, this time with an expression she had never seen before, a mix of disappointment and suspicion that made her shrink in her chair. I can explain," Jessica began, but her trembling voice only confirmed the suspicions growing in Michael's mind. "Then explain, now." and be honest with me for the first time since we met." The restaurant around them seemed frozen in time. The noise of other customers faded into a distant murmur as the three main characters of this scene remained locked in a tense triangle of distrust, revelation, and protection. Jessica looked at Emma with an expression that mixed anger and desperation. How had a child managed to destroy months of careful planning in mere seconds? "Emma, sweetheart, could you give us a minute?" Jessica asked, trying to regain control of the situation. "No," Michael interrupted firmly. "Emma, you can stay. In fact, I'd like you to. Something tells me your presence here isn't a coincidence." Emma nodded timidly and pulled an empty chair from a nearby table. Her movements were cautious, like someone who had learned early not to be a bother, but also knew when her voice needed to be heard. "Jessica, I'm waiting for an explanation," Michael said, crossing his arms over his chest. She took several deep breaths, as if gathering courage or perhaps calculating her options. Finally, her words came out in a halting stream. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Michael, never. It was just to make you relax, to lower your defenses." "My defenses against what?" "Against me. Against the possibility of truly loving me." Michael felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. The woman he had begun dreaming of building a future with had just admitted to drugging his drink to manipulate his feelings. "Are you saying you needed to drug me to make me like you?" "No," Jessica exclaimed, reaching her hands toward him. "It's not like that. It's more complicated." Emma watched the scene with wide eyes, clearly understanding she had stumbled upon something much bigger than she imagined. But there was something in her posture that suggested she wasn't entirely naive about the complexities of adults. "Then explain how it is," Michael said, his voice laced with a coldness that cut through the air. Jessica glanced around the restaurant, noticing several customers were clearly paying attention to their conversation. The situation was becoming public, and that made everything even more complicated. "Not here, Michael, please. Can we go somewhere more private?" "No, right here, now. And in front of Emma, since she's the one who stopped me from drinking. You're a potion." The word potion came out with such disdain that Jessica recoiled as if she'd been slapped. She realized she'd lost any chance of controlling the narrative. "I work for someone," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Work for someone how?" "Someone who has an interest in your business." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. His consulting firm had grown significantly over the past 2 years, and he knew it had attracted the attention of several competitors, but he never imagined someone would go so far as to use romantic espionage. "Who?" "I can't say. They're not people to be messed with." Emma, who had stayed quiet until then, suddenly leaned forward. "Mister, do you want me to call my mum? She knows everyone here. Maybe she knows something about this lady." The child's suggestion was like a ray of hope for Michael. Perhaps there was more information available than he'd thought. "Yes, Emma. Please call your mother." Jessica visibly tensed at the prospect. "Michael, that's not necessary. I can explain everything to you, but not here, not in front of others. So far, you've only given me half-truths and lies, Jessica. You've lost the right to control how this conversation goes." Emma dashed toward the kitchen, her small feet making muffled sounds on the restaurant floor. As they waited, Michael and Jessica remained silent, he studying every expression on her face, she clearly weighing her next words. Within minutes, Emma returned with a woman around 40 years old, her hair tied in a practical bun and an apron stained from hours of hard work in the kitchen. "Good evening," the woman said, clearly uncomfortable being in the customer area in her work clothes. "I'm Deborah, Emma's mother. She told me there was some trouble here." Michael stood respectfully. "Nice to meet you, Deborah. I'm Michael Thompson. Your daughter just saved me from a very dangerous situation, and I'm trying to understand. What's going on?" Deborah glanced at Jessica, and her expression shifted subtly as if she recognized something. "Do you know this woman?" Michael asked, noticing the change in Deborah's expression. "Not exactly, no," Deborah replied cautiously. "But I've seen her a few times. Always with different men, always here at the restaurant, always well-dressed, always very calculated." Michael's heart sank further. The implication was clear. Jessica wasn't a woman who had taken a spontaneous interest in him. She was a professional, and he was just another target. "How many times have you seen her here?" he asked. "At least 5 or 6 times in the last 3 months, always with different men, like I said, and always watching, listening to conversations, taking discreet notes on her phone." Jessica stayed silent, but her face had lost all color. It was clear she hadn't expected her past activities to be uncovered. "Did you ever see anything suspicious during her meetings?" Michael pressed. Deborah hesitated, glancing at Emma as if asking for permission to continue. "Mom, you can tell him," Emma encouraged. "The mister needs to know the truth. Once I saw her put something in an older gentleman's drink. I was worried, but when I checked a few minutes later, the man seemed fine, just more relaxed, more talkative. I thought maybe it was my imagination." Michael felt sick. How many men had Jessica manipulated before him? How many deals? How much confidential information had she obtained through her tactics? "Jessica, how many?" he asked, his voice thick with a mix of anger and sadness. "Michael, please, how many men did you do this to before me?" She remained silent, but her tears now flowed freely down her face. It was a silent confession that hurt more than any words could. Emma, showing wisdom beyond her years, approached Michael and gently touched his arm. "Sir, what matters is that you're okay now, and now that you know the truth, you can protect yourself." The simplicity and kindness of the child stood in stark contrast to the complexity and dishonesty of the adult world that had been revealed that night. "Deborah, you too saved my life today. I don't know how to thank you," said Michael, genuinely moved. "No need to thank us," Deborah replied. "Emma was raised to do what's right. That's how I've always tried to raise her." Michael looked at Jessica one last time. She seemed smaller now, vulnerable in a way she had never shown before. But he knew any sympathy he might feel for her would be a dangerous mistake. "Jessica, I want you to leave now. And if I find out you're doing this to other people, I'll take the necessary steps to protect them." "Michael, you don't understand. It's not that simple. I can't just stop." "Why not?" Because the people I work for don't just let you walk away." This revelation added a new layer of danger to the situation. Michael realized Jessica might not just be a manipulator, but also a victim of some larger scheme. "Who are these people, Jessica?" "I can't tell you. If I do, they'll know I talked. And then both you and I will be in real danger." Emma and Deborah exchanged worried glances. The situation was escalating into something much bigger than they had imagined. "Mr. Michael," Deborah said hesitantly, "maybe it would be best for you to leave. If dangerous people are involved, it's not safe to keep talking in public." Michael considered the suggestion. On one hand, he wanted answers. On the other, he didn't want to put Emma and Deborah in danger by involving them further. "Jessica, I'll give you one chance to do the right thing. Tell me everything you know. Help me understand who these people are and how they operate. In return, I'll try to help you get out of this." Jessica looked at him with a mix of hope and despair. "You'd do that? Even after everything I've done?" "I would. Not because you deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. And because Emma taught me today that we should always try to help when we see something wrong happening." Emma smiled shyly at the praise, but her expression soon turned serious again. "Mom, what if those bad people find out Emma saw and told?" Emma's question brought a new worry to Michael's mind. He hadn't considered that by exposing Jessica, he might be putting the child who had saved him in danger. "Deborah, Emma, I need you to know I'll do everything in my power to protect you. If there's any threat, any trouble, you call me immediately," Michael said, handing his business card to Deborah. "Sir, you don't need to worry about us. We know how to take care of ourselves," Deborah replied, but she took the card. "No, Deborah, you got involved in this because you did the right thing. Now it's my responsibility to make sure you're safe." Jessica, who had been watching this exchange, suddenly stood up abruptly. "I need to go. They'll get suspicious if I stay too long." "No, Jessica. You're going to sit down and explain everything to me. Who are they? How did they recruit you? What do they want from me specifically?" "Michael, you don't understand. If I don't go back soon, they'll know something went wrong. And if they know something went wrong, they'll want to find out what it was. The urgency in her voice was palpable, and Michael began to realize he might be dealing with something far more dangerous than he'd initially thought. All right, but this isn't over. Tomorrow you'll meet me and tell me everything, and you'll bring proof of who these people are. I can't promise that, Michael. Then I'll go to the police, and I'll tell them exactly what happened here tonight, including the attempt to drug my drink. Jessica seemed torn between two equally dangerous choices. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. Tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. There's a coffee shop on 5th Avenue, the Central Coffee House. I'll be there. What if you don't show? I'll show, because right now, you're my only way out of this. With that, Jessica grabbed her purse and hurried out of the restaurant, leaving behind an air of mystery and danger that seemed to linger in the room. Michael, Emma, and Deborah stayed there for a moment, processing everything that had happened. The romantic dinner that had started the evening had turned into something entirely different and potentially dangerous. "Mr. Thompson," Emma said, breaking the silence, "are you sure you should meet her tomorrow? What if it's a trap?" The genuine concern in the child's voice touched Michael's heart. In one night, Emma had shown more real care for him than Jessica had in 3 weeks of dating. "Emma's right," Deborah agreed. "Maybe you shouldn't go to that meeting alone." Michael weighed his options. On one hand, he wanted answers. On the other, he was starting to realize he might be getting involved in something far more complex and dangerous than he could handle alone. "You're right, I won't go alone. And before I do, I'll take some precautions." "What kind of precautions?" Deborah asked. "I'll look into Jessica more, I'll check if others have had similar experiences with her, and I'll let a few people know where I'll be and when." Emma nodded approvingly. "That's smart. My mom always says it's better to be safe than sorry." Michael smiled at the girl. In a world of complicated and dangerous adults, Emma's honesty and simplicity were like a beacon of hope. "Emma, can I ask you something? Why did you decide to warn me about what you saw? You don't even know me." Emma thought for a moment before answering. "Because it was wrong. And when we see something wrong happening, we have to speak up, even if it's hard or scary. Even when the person doing wrong is older and more powerful than you. Especially then," Emma replied with a seriousness that was striking for her age. Michael felt a lump in his throat. This child had risked her own safety to protect a stranger, simply because it was the right thing to do. "Deborah, you've raised an extraordinary daughter." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. But she's always been this way. Even as a little girl, she could never stay quiet when she saw injustice." "And has that ever caused trouble for you?" Deborah and Emma exchanged a look that suggested it had. "A few times," Deborah admitted. "But teaching a child to do what's right is more important than avoiding trouble." Michael nodded, admiring the strength and character of this family even more. "Well, I should get home now and think all this through. But first, let me pay for your dinner. It's the least I can do." "That's not necessary, sir," Deborah protested. "Please let me do this, and tomorrow after my meeting with Jessica, I'll come back here to tell you how it went. You deserve to know the end of this story you helped start." Emma smiled, widely for the first time that night. "I'd like to know what happens next, Mr. Thompson." "Then you will, I promise." After settling the bill and warmly saying goodbye to Emma and Deborah, Michael left the restaurant with his mind buzzing with questions and concerns. The evening had begun with romantic expectations and ended with the discovery of a world of lies and manipulation he hadn't even known existed. On his way home, he couldn't stop thinking about Emma's bravery. A 10-year-old child had done something many adults wouldn't have dared to do. She had put herself in a potentially dangerous situation to protect a stranger. He also couldn't stop thinking about Jessica. Had he truly fallen in love with her, or at least thought he had? Discovering it had all been a sham, a calculated manipulation, hurt in a way he wasn't prepared to feel. But perhaps the most disturbing part of all was the implication that there was an organized group of people doing this systematically. How many other men had been targeted? How many businesses had been sabotaged through this tactic? Arriving home, Michael went straight to his office and turned on his computer. If he was going to meet Jessica tomorrow, he wanted to be prepared. He began searching her name on social media, trying to find any information that could help him better understand who she really was. What he found was unsettling. There were several photos of her with different men over the past 2 years, always at expensive restaurants, always smiling, always appearing completely in love. But now that he knew the truth, he could see the artificiality in her expressions. He also found some interesting connections. Several of the men in the photos were successful businessmen, owners of consulting or business development firms. There was a clear pattern. She had a specific type of target. He decided to do something he had never done before. He began searching for the names of the men he had identified in the photos and reached out to a few of them through professional networks. If his theory was correct, other men had gone through the same experience he had. The first response came just 20 minutes after he sent a discreet message to a businessman named David Miller, who appeared in 3 different photos with Jessica. "Michael, thank you for reaching out. Yes, I met Jessica about 6 months ago. The relationship ended abruptly when I discovered inconsistencies in her stories. I'd really like to talk to you about this. Can you call me tomorrow?" Michael's heart raced. His theory was proving true. Jessica wasn't just an occasional scammer. She was part of something much bigger and more organized. He kept researching late into the night, finding more connections, more patterns, more evidence that he had stumbled upon a sophisticated corporate espionage operation. When he finally went to bed around 2 in the morning, his mind was still processing everything. Tomorrow would be a crucial day. The meeting with Jessica could provide the answers he needed, or it could put him in even greater danger. But one thing was clear. Emma's courage had exposed something far bigger than any of them had imagined. And now, Michael felt responsible, not only for protecting the girl and her mother, but also for uncovering the full truth and preventing other men from falling into the same trap. Before falling asleep, he made a mental note to bring flowers for Emma and Deborah the next day. They had saved his life, his business, and possibly his sanity. It was the least he could do to thank them. The next day, Michael woke up with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He spent the morning making calls to the other men he had identified in the photos with Jessica. Each conversation confirmed his suspicions and added new layers of complexity to the situation. David Miller was particularly helpful. He had carefully documented his interactions with Jessica after he began suspecting her, and had gathered substantial evidence of her activities. "Michael, you have no idea what you've stumbled upon," said David during a phone call that morning. "Jessica is part of a network that specifically targets business consultants and developers. They collect information on strategies, clients, and even financial data. How did you find this out?" "After I broke things off with her, I hired a private investigator. We discovered she was working for a group of businessmen who used this information to sabotage businesses and steal clients." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. His company had grown significantly in recent months, and he had shared plenty of confidential information with Jessica during their romantic meetings. "David, do you know the names of the people behind this?" "Some. The investigator I hired has a full dossier. If you want, I can share the details with you." "Please, and David, do you think it's dangerous for me to meet her today?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Honestly, yes, these people don't play games. Once they find out she's been exposed, they'll want to know how and by whom. But if I don't go, I'll never get the answers I need." "Then go, but bring backup, and have an escape plan." After hanging up, Michael sat in his office for several minutes, weighing the decision ahead of him. Part of him wanted to cancel the meeting and just try to forget everything. But another part knew that wasn't an option. If he didn't stop this operation, other men would become victims. And more importantly, Emma and Deborah could be in danger if the people behind Jessica found out who had exposed the scheme. He decided he would go to the meeting, but take every possible precaution. He called a friend who worked in corporate security and explained the situation. "Michael, this is serious. I'll have 2 of my men inside the coffee shop disguised as customers, and I'll be outside monitoring the situation by radio." "Thank you, Robert. I don't know what I've uncovered, but I know it's big. Just promise me one thing. If things get dangerous, you leave immediately. Don't try to be a hero. I promise. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Michael was sitting in the central coffee house, nervous but determined. He had arrived early to pick a table with good visibility and escape routes. Robert's two men were already positioned at nearby tables, reading newspapers and drinking coffee like regular customers. Jessica arrived promptly at 2. She looked different from the night before, less confident, more fragile. She sat across from Michael with hesitant movements. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for showing up. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't. Last night was complicated." "Complicated how?" Jessica glanced nervously around the coffee shop before answering. "They wanted to know why I left the restaurant so quickly. I had to make up a story about you getting an emergency call. And they believed you? For now. But they're suspicious. And they gave me a deadline." "Deadline for what?" "To get the information they want from you. If I don't deliver by the end of the week, they'll take other measures." Michael's stomach twisted. The implied threat was clear. "Jessica, I need you to tell me everything. Who these people are, how they recruited you, what exactly they want from me." She took several deep breaths before speaking. "My real name isn't Jessica. It's Jennifer Miller Davis. I'm 28 and from Tampa." Michael nodded, urging her to continue. 2 years ago, I was in a very difficult financial situation. My mother was sick, needing expensive treatment, and I couldn't find steady work." "How did they find you?" "Through a job posting that seemed too good to be true. They promised a lot of money for social work that involved meeting people and making connections. And you didn't suspect anything?" "I was desperate. When you're watching your mother waste away because you can't afford her treatment, you take any opportunity." Michael could hear the genuine pain in her voice, and it complicated his emotions. It was hard to stay angry when he saw that she too was in some way a victim. "How does the scheme work?" "They give me profiles of specific men, successful businessmen, usually in consulting or business development. I study their interests, their routines, their weaknesses, and then I accidentally run into them at places they frequent. I create a persona that appeals to them, and I start a relationship with the goal of collecting information." "Exactly. Business strategies, client lists, financial details, anything that can be used to compete with them or sabotage them." Michael felt sick imagining how much confidential information he had shared with her during their intimate conversations. "And the drug in the drink, what was the purpose?" "To make you talk more freely, to lower your inhibitions so you'd share things you'd normally keep to yourself." "How many men have you done this to?" Jennifer lowered her eyes, clearly ashamed. "You're the 12th. The number hit Michael like a punch. 12 men had been manipulated, their trust betrayed, their businesses potentially sabotaged. Who's behind this? Who are the bosses?" "There are 3 main men. They call themselves the Consortium. They're businessmen who use the information we gather to sabotage competitors and steal contracts." "What are their names?" Jennifer hesitated, clearly afraid of the consequences of revealing this. "Jennifer, you said I was your only chance to get out of this, but I can only help you if I know who we're dealing with. Richard Anderson, Brandon Williams, and Jonathan Reynolds. They own a consulting firm called Corporate Strategy Solutions." Michael knew those names. They were direct competitors of his firm, and he'd lost several major contracts to them in recent months. Now he understood why. "Do they know you're here talking to me?" "No. At least, I hope not. But if I don't show up at their office by 5 today with the information they want, they'll know something's wrong." Michael checked his watch. It was 2:45. They had just over 2 hours to find a solution. "Jennifer, I'm willing to help you get out of this, but I need you to help me stop these people. Other men are being hurt, other businesses are being destroyed." "How?" "They're powerful, Michael. They have connections, resources. If they find out I talked to you, they won't. We'll be smart about this." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. "What do you have in mind?" Jennifer asked, a spark of hope in her eyes. "First, you'll go back to them and give them false information about me. Details that seem valuable but will actually expose them. How so? I'll create a fake project, fake clients, fake strategies. When they act on that information, they'll reveal themselves. Jennifer considered the idea for a moment. It could work, but it's risky. If they realize the information is fake, that's why you need to be convincing, and that's why I'll need more details about how they operate. Over the next hour, Jennifer Miller Davis provided detailed information about how the operation worked. Michael Thompson discovered there were at least 6 women working for the consortium, each responsible for different targets. He also learned they had a network of informants in restaurants and luxury hotels who reported on business meetings and conversations. Michael, there's something else you need to know, Jennifer said, her voice dropping even lower. What? They don't just gather information to compete. Sometimes they do worse things. What kind of things? Active sabotage. They've caused financial trouble for some business owners, spread damaging rumors, even created situations that forced people to sell their businesses for far less than they were worth. Michael felt a cold anger rising inside him. These men weren't just unfair competitors, they were criminals destroying lives. Jennifer, I need you to help me document all of this. Recordings, emails, any evidence that can be used against them. It would be very dangerous. They're paranoid about security. They check phones, monitor communications. Then we'll have to be creative. Do you know their offices? I do. I've been there several times for briefing meetings. Are there security cameras? Yes, but there are also blind spots. The file room, for example. An idea began forming in Michael's mind. Jennifer, could you get access to their files? If there are records of their operations, names of other victims, evidence of their activities? Maybe, but it would be extremely risky. I know, but it might be our only chance to stop them for good. Jennifer was silent for several minutes, clearly wrestling with the decision. If I do this, and if we get enough evidence, do you promise you'll protect me? That you'll help me leave New York City and start a new life? I promise. And I'll make sure your mother gets the treatment she needs too. Tears began streaming down Jennifer's face. Why would you do this for me, after everything I've done to you? Because I believe you're a good person stuck in an impossible situation, and because a very wise little girl taught me yesterday that we should always try to help when we see something wrong happening. The girl from the restaurant, Emma, she's 10 years old and braver than any adult I know. Jennifer smiled for the first time since they'd sat down. She saved your life, and maybe mine too. Then let's make sure her sacrifice was worth it. Let's stop these people. They spent another half hour planning the details. Jennifer would return to the consortium's office as planned, deliver false information about Michael, and try to access the files during the chaos that would follow when they acted on the misinformation. One last thing, Jennifer. If anything goes wrong, if you feel in danger, message this number. Michael handed her a card with a different number. It's a special phone my security friend monitors constantly. Thank you, Michael, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Let's make sure this works first. When Jennifer left the coffee house, Michael stayed seated for a few more minutes, processing everything he'd learned. The situation was far more complex and dangerous than he'd imagined, but there was also a real chance to stop the consortium's criminal activities. His phone rang. It was Robert, his security friend. How did it go? Robert asked. Complicated. Much more complicated than we thought. I need to talk to you in person. I'm 2 blocks away from the coffee shop. I can be there in 2 minutes. Perfect. And Robert, we'll need more resources. This is much bigger than just a simple scam attempt. When Robert arrived at the coffee shop, Michael spent the next hour telling him everything he had uncovered. His friend grew increasingly serious as he listened to the details. Michael, this is a sophisticated criminal operation. We're talking corporate espionage, extortion, possibly even money laundering. I know. The question is, can we stop them? We can try, but we'll need solid evidence, and we'll have to be very careful not to tip them off about what we're doing. Jennifer will try to access their files this afternoon. What if she gets caught? Then we have a very big problem, Robert thought for a moment. I'll put a surveillance team in the building where their office is. If anything goes wrong, at least we'll know immediately. What about Emma and Deborah? I'm still worried about their safety. Already taken care of. I have 2 men doing discreet rounds at the restaurant where they work. If anything suspicious happens there, we'll know. Michael felt a small relief. At least the people who had risked helping him were being protected. Robert, there's more. I found out there are at least 11 other men who fell victim to the same scheme. I think we should reach out to them. Good idea. The more victims testify, the stronger the case against the consortium. I've already started making contact. One of them, David Miller, even hired a private investigator. He might have valuable information. Excellent. I'll reach out to him today. They spent more time refining their plans before parting ways. Michael went home to wait for news from Jennifer, while Robert began preparations for the surveillance operation. On the way home, Michael couldn't stop thinking about how his life had completely changed in just 24 hours. The night before, he had been a successful businessman, in love with a woman he thought was perfect for him. Now he was involved in an operation to expose a corporate espionage ring, and all because of the courage of a 10-year-old girl. He decided to stop by the restaurant where Emma and Deborah worked. He wanted to check on them and update them on the situation. He found Emma sitting at a table in the back, doing what looked like homework. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile. "Mr. Michael, you came to tell us how the meeting went." "I did, Emma. Where's your mom?" "In the kitchen." "Mom," Emma called out. "Mr. Michael is here." Deborah appeared a few seconds later, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Mr. Michael, how did it go? Did you find out the truth about that woman?" Michael sat down with them and spent the next 20 minutes carefully explaining what he had discovered. He left out the most dangerous details, but told them Jessica was part of a larger group doing wrong things to several men. "So Emma really saved you," Deborah said, looking proudly at her daughter. "She saved much more than that, Deborah. She may have saved many other people too." Emma blushed at the praise, but there was worry in her eyes. "Mr. Michael, do those bad people know it was Emma who told?" "No, Emma, and I'll do everything to make sure they never find out. In fact, I have some friends making sure you both stay safe." "What kind of friends?" Deborah asked, her voice tinged with maternal concern. "Security professionals. They'll keep an eye on the restaurant for a few days just to make sure nothing suspicious happens." Deborah nodded, clearly relieved. "Mr. Michael, can I ask you something?" said Emma. "Of course, Emma. Do you think that woman Jessica is really bad, or was she just scared of the bad people?" The question showed impressive emotional maturity for a 10-year-old. Emma had grasped the complexity of Jennifer's situation in a way many adults couldn't. "That's a very smart question, Emma. I think she's a good person who was forced to do bad things. Sometimes people make poor choices when they're desperate or afraid. And now you're going to help her stop doing bad things?" "I'll try, Emma. But only if she helps me stop the people forcing her to do them." Emma nodded, satisfied with the answer. "It's good to help people, even when they've done bad things to us." The child's simple wisdom touched Michael's heart once again. He was dealing with a complex situation of betrayal, crime, and revenge, but Emma had boiled it all down to its essence. Helping people was always the right thing to do. His phone rang. It was a message from Jennifer. "I'm at the office. So far everything's normal. I'll try to access the files in an hour." Michael showed the message to Deborah and Emma. "Is that the woman who put something in your drink?" Emma asked. "Yes, Emma, but now she's trying to do the right thing. I hope she succeeds and stays safe." Emma's ability to empathize even with someone who had tried to hurt him was extraordinary. Michael wondered if he'd had that same generosity of spirit at her age. He spent another hour with Emma and Deborah, helping Emma with her math homework and talking with Deborah about her life and work. It was comforting to be in the company of genuine, honest people after realizing he'd been deceived for months. At 5:30 p.m., another message from Jennifer arrived. "Trouble. They're suspicious. They questioned the information I gave about you. I'll try to access the files now while they're distracted with checks." Michael's stomach twisted. The situation was escalating faster than he'd expected. "Something wrong, Mr. Michael?" Deborah asked, noticing his worried expression. "Maybe. Things are getting more dangerous for Jessica. I mean Jennifer." "Is she trying to get evidence against the bad people?" Emma asked. She is, Emma, but they're starting to suspect her. Emma thought for a moment. Mr. Michael, if she gets the evidence, what will happen to the bad people? I hope they're punished for what they've done and that they can't hurt anyone else. What about Jennifer? Will she be in trouble? Not if I can help it, Emma. I promise I'll protect her. His phone rang again. This time, it was Robert. Michael, we have a problem. Our men saw suspicious activity at the consortium building. Looks like they're preparing to leave quickly. Did they find out about Jennifer? Not sure yet, but something spooked them. They're loading boxes and documents into cars. Panic set in. If the consortium was fleeing, Jennifer could be in immediate danger. Robert, do you know where she is? Our men saw her enter the building but didn't see her leave, and she hasn't responded to messages in 15 minutes. I'm going there. No, Michael. It's too dangerous. Let my men handle it. She's in this because of me. I can't just sit here waiting. Michael hung up and stood quickly. Mr. Michael, what's happening? Deborah asked, alarm in her voice. Jennifer might be in danger. I have to go help her. Emma stood too. Can I come with you? No, Emma. It's too dangerous. You both stay here where it's safe. But what if you need help? The genuine concern in Emma's voice nearly broke Michael Thompson's heart. In just 2 days, this child had become more important to him than people he'd known for years. Emma, the best way you can help me is by staying safe. Promise me you'll stay here with your mother. Emma nodded reluctantly. I promise, but promise you'll come back to tell me what happened. I promise, Emma. Michael rushed out of the restaurant, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. Jennifer Miller Davis had risked herself to help him, and now he needed to do the same for her. On his way to the consortium's office, he called Robert again. Any updates? Still no sign of Jennifer, but Richard Anderson and Jonathan Reynolds just left the building with several boxes. Brandon Williams is still inside. And Jennifer? No word. Michael pressed the accelerator, ignoring the speed limits. Every passing minute deepened his worry for Jennifer's safety. He reached the building 10 minutes later and found Robert waiting in a parked car across the street. Situation? Michael asked as he got in. Complicated. Brandon Williams is still inside, along with 2 men we couldn't identify. Jennifer hasn't made contact in 40 minutes. We need to get in there. Michael, this isn't a movie. We can't just storm a commercial building. Then what do you suggest? Robert thought for a moment. 2 options. Either we wait for her to come out, or we create a distraction to check if she's okay. What kind of distraction? Fire alarm. Forces everyone to evacuate. What if she can't leave on her own? The implication was clear, and Robert understood immediately. Then we'll know we have a much more serious situation. Before they could decide, they saw Brandon Williams rush out of the building, talking agitatedly on his phone. He got into a car and sped off. Now's our chance, Robert said. The building should be empty except for Jennifer and possibly the 2 men we saw earlier. Should we go in? Yes, but carefully. They crossed the street and entered the building. The lobby was deserted, and lights on several floors were off, clear signs of a swift evacuation. Which floor? Robert whispered. Jennifer said their office is on the 12th floor. They took the stairs, avoiding the elevators that might make noise. With each floor, Michael's anxiety grew. On the 12th floor, they found the doors to Corporate Strategy Solutions open. Papers were scattered on the floor, and drawers were left ajar, evidence of a hasty departure. Jennifer? Michael called softly. No answer. They searched the office carefully, checking every room. In the file room, they found signs of recent activity, documents strewn about and a chair knocked over. Michael, look at this, Robert said, pointing to a cell phone on the floor. Michael recognized it immediately. It was Jennifer's phone. She was here. But where is she now? Robert examined the area more closely. There are signs of a struggle. Look at these marks on the floor, and this drawer is damaged, like someone tried to grab onto it. Michael's heart sank. Jennifer had been discovered and possibly taken against her will. We need to call the police, he said. Wait. First, let's see if we can find what she was after. If we involve the authorities, we'd better have solid evidence. They spent the next 20 minutes gathering documents left behind in the rush. What they found was more than enough to confirm everything Jennifer had told them, and much more. There were detailed lists of targets, psychological profiles of the men who had been manipulated, financial records showing how the collected information had been used for corporate sabotage, and even recordings of private conversations that had been secretly taped. "My God," Michael whispered as he read a document detailing how his own information had been used to sabotage 3 of his biggest contracts. "Michael, look at this." Robert held up a folder labeled Special Operations. "There's information about intimidation, extortion, and even plans to eliminate people who became too problematic." Michael's blood ran cold. Jennifer wasn't just missing, she was in mortal danger. "We have to find her, Robert, now." "I agree. But where? They could have taken her anywhere." Michael racked his brain, trying to recall any detail Jennifer might have mentioned about locations the consortium used. She mentioned they sometimes held meetings outside the city, a farmhouse or something like that. "Do you have any idea where?" "No, but maybe they left some clue here." They kept searching, growing more desperate by the minute. Finally, Robert found a portable GPS on one of the tables with a log of recent addresses. "There's an address here way outside the city, a rural property in the Catskills area." "That has to be it. Let's go." "Michael, we can't go alone. If they took Jennifer there, it's because they have complete control over the place. Then what do? We call the police and explain the situation. With this evidence, they'll take it seriously." But before they could make the call, Michael's phone rang. It was a message from an unknown number. "If you want to see Jennifer alive again, come alone to the address I'll send. You have 2 hours. If you bring anyone else or involve the authorities, she dies." The address that followed was exactly the one they'd found on the GPS. "It's an obvious trap," Robert said. "I know, but I can't abandon Jennifer. She risked everything for me. Michael, if you go alone, they'll kill you both. And if I don't go, they'll kill her anyway." Robert looked at the evidence they'd gathered. "There's a third option. You go, but not alone. I'll take you there with a team, but we'll stay hidden. When we get an opening, we act. It's too risky." "Riskier than letting Jennifer die?" Michael knew Robert was right. It was an impossible situation, but they had to try. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, if it looks like we're making things worse for Jennifer, you back off. Deal." They left the office quickly, taking all the evidence they'd gathered with them. If something happened to them, at least the authorities would still have enough to continue the investigation. On the way to the Catskills, Michael couldn't stop thinking about Emma and Deborah. If something happened to him, who would make sure they stayed safe? The consortium knew Jennifer had been exposed, but they still didn't know how. If they found out about Emma, he called the number he'd given Deborah. "Deborah, it's Michael. I need you and Emma to leave the restaurant now and go somewhere safe." "What's happened, Mr. Michael?" "The bad people found out Jennifer was trying to help. They might try to figure out who else is involved." "Where should we go?" "There's a hotel on 5th Avenue, the Central Park Hotel. Go there and stay in the room. I'll call ahead and explain you're my guests." "How long will we have to stay there?" "Until I'm sure you're safe, Deborah. This is very important. Don't tell anyone where you are. Don't go back to the restaurant. Don't leave the hotel." "Understood, Mr. Michael. And you? Are you safe?" Michael looked out the car window as they headed toward a rural property where a woman was being held hostage because of his actions. "I'll be fine, Deborah. Take good care of Emma." After hanging up, Robert broke the silence. "Good call. The fewer people involved, the better. Robert, if anything happens to me today, I want you to make sure Emma and Deborah are protected. They have nothing to do with this, but they became targets because they did the right thing. Nothing's going to happen to you, Michael. We have a plan. But if it does, I promise I'll take care of them." They arrived at the rural property as the sun was setting. It was an isolated place, surrounded by dense woods, with only one access road, perfect for activities that needed to stay hidden. Robert positioned his men at strategic points around the property, all equipped with radios and instructed to act only if Michael gave the signal or if the situation turned obviously deadly. "Remember," Robert said before Michael got out of the car, "your goal is to keep Jennifer alive and create an opportunity for us to act. Don't try to be a hero." "Understood." Michael walked slowly toward the main house on the property. It was an old but well-maintained building, with an air of abandonment that suggested it wasn't used regularly. The front door opened before he reached it. Brandon Williams appeared holding a gun casually but threateningly. "Michael Thompson, finally we meet in person. Where's Jennifer?" "Straight to the point, I like that. She's here alive, but her future condition depends entirely on you." "What do you want?" "Come in. Let's talk like civilized people." Michael entered the house, his eyes adjusting to the dimmer light inside. The decor was typical of a countryside home, but there was something sinister in the atmosphere that had nothing to do with the furniture. "Have a seat," Brandon said, pointing to an armchair in the living room. "I'd rather stand." "Where's Jennifer?" "She's safe, for now. But I need to understand a few things first." "Like what?" "How you found out about our operation, how you knew Jennifer was working for us, and more importantly, what you did with the information." Michael realized Brandon didn't know about Emma. That was good, but it also meant he'd have to come up with an alternative explanation to protect the girl. Jennifer was careless. She left obvious signs that she was lying about her past. "What kind of signs?" "Inconsistencies in her stories. Details about her life that didn't add up. Once I started suspecting, it wasn't hard to confirm." Brandon studied Michael's face, clearly trying to decide if he was telling the truth. "And what did you do with that information?" "I confronted Jennifer. She confessed everything and asked for my help to get out of the situation, and you agreed to help her. Why? After finding out she'd betrayed you." "Because I realized she was a victim too. You forced her into this by threatening her mother." Brandon smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. Jennifer was always too sentimental for this kind of work. A shame, because she was very good at what she did. "Where is she, Brandon?" "Impatience won't help you, Michael. We still have things to discuss." "Like what?" "Like compensation for the damage you caused to our operation." Michael felt a chill down his spine. They didn't plan on simply letting him walk away. "What kind of compensation?" "Information, strategies, client lists. Essentially, everything Jennifer was supposed to get from you over the last 3 months. And if I refuse, then Jennifer dies. And you too, obviously." The threat was delivered so casually that Michael felt his stomach twist. These people spoke about murder as if it were a business transaction. "What if I cooperate? Then Jennifer lives. As for you, well, that depends on how valuable the information you provide is." Michael realized he was in a no-win situation. But he also noticed that Brandon was speaking as if he had total control, which suggested he didn't know about Robert's team positioned around the property. "I want to see Jennifer first. I need to make sure she's alive and unharmed. Of course, but first I'll need you to hand over your phone and any other electronic devices you might have." Michael hesitated for a moment, but then surrendered. His phone. It was a risk, but he needed to keep Brandon confident, so he'd let his guard down. "Now we can see Jennifer." Brandon led him down a hallway to a closed door at the back of the house. He opened the door and pushed Michael inside. Jennifer was sitting in a chair at the center of the room, her hands tied behind her back but seemingly unharmed. When she saw Michael, her eyes filled with tears of relief and despair. "Michael, you shouldn't have come." "I couldn't leave you here, Jennifer." "How touching," Brandon said sarcastically. "A romantic reunion under such special circumstances." Michael ignored the comment and focused on Jennifer. "Are you hurt?" "No, at least not physically." "Well, now that you've been reunited, we can get down to business," Brandon interrupted. "Michael, I want you to write a detailed report on all the business strategies your company is developing. Current clients, prospects, future projects, everything." "That'll take hours." "We have time, and the more thorough the report, the better Jennifer will be treated." Michael understood the implied threat. He'd have to find a way to stall until Robert and his team could act. "I'll need a computer and some files from my office." "Don't be ridiculous, Michael. You'll write it by hand, from memory. And you'll start now." Brandon brought in a small table and some sheets of paper. Michael sat down and began writing, fabricating strategies and information that would seem valuable but would actually be useless or even harmful to anyone trying to use them. As he wrote, he tried to talk to Jennifer, both to comfort her and to keep Brandon distracted. "Jennifer, did you find what you were looking for at the office?" "I found a few things, but they caught me before I could get out with everything." "What kind of things?" Brandon cut in sharply. "Enough talking, Michael. Focus on what you're writing, and Jennifer, you stay quiet." But Jennifer had given Michael the information he needed. She'd managed to find evidence before being captured, which meant that even if something happened to them, there would still be material to incriminate the consortium. Michael kept writing, crafting elaborate fictional strategies that would seem genuine to an outsider. Every so often he asked questions that forced Brandon to reveal how he planned to use the material, information that could be useful for Robert when the time came to act. After about an hour, Brandon grew impatient. "Oh, you're taking too long, Michael, and some of these strategies seem too convenient. They're complex strategies, Brandon. If you want valuable information, you'll have to give me time to explain them properly. Maybe you need more motivation." Brandon stepped closer to Jennifer and placed a threatening hand on her shoulder. "No!" shouted Michael, rising from his chair. "Don't hurt her, I'll write faster." "You'd better. And Michael, if I find out you're feeding me false information, Jennifer will pay the price." Michael knew he was walking a tightrope. If Brandon discovered the information was fake, Jennifer would be in immediate danger. But if he gave real information, he'd be betraying his own company and clients. He decided to risk a different approach. "Brandon, can I make a suggestion?" "What suggestion?" "Instead of forcing me to give you information you can't verify, why don't we make a smarter deal?" "What kind of deal?" "I work for you officially. I provide real-time updates as things develop. In exchange, Jennifer is released and we both stay alive." Brandon considered the proposal for a moment. "Interesting. But how can I trust?" "Sausas, because I'd have no choice. You'd have leverage over me permanently, and I'd be far more useful as an ongoing source than a one-time report. What's to stop you from going to the authorities after Jennifer is freed?" "The fact that I'd become an active participant in corporate espionage. I'd be just as guilty as you." Jennifer stared at Michael in horror, clearly not understanding he was buying time to create an opportunity for Robert to act. "Michael, you can't do this," she said. "Jennifer, sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect the people we love." The words slipped out before he could think, but as he said them, he realized they were true. Somewhere in the last few days, he'd developed real feelings for Jennifer, despite all the betrayal and manipulation. Brandon seemed to believe the sincerity in Michael's voice. "Interesting. You've actually fallen for her, haven't you?" "Yes, that's why I'm willing to do anything to keep her safe." "Well, your proposal has merit, but before I agree, I need a show of good faith." "What kind of show?" "A specific piece of information I can verify immediately. Something that proves you're being honest with me." Michael thought fast. He needed to give something true enough to check, but harmless. "Next week, my firm is announcing a partnership with TechInnovate. It's a small contract, but it could signal how we plan to expand into tech." Brandon picked up a phone and dialed. "Check for any movement between Thompson Consulting and TechInnovate," he said to whoever was on the other end. As they waited for confirmation, Michael weighed his options. Robert and his team were likely growing impatient, especially since they'd lost contact when he handed over his phone. At any moment they might act, which could be disastrous if Jennifer was in the line of fire. Brandon's phone rang minutes later. "Yes?" he answered. "Understood, thanks." He hung up and gave Michael an approving look. "Interesting. My contacts confirm movement between your firm and TechInnovate. Seems you're being honest. So do we have a deal?" "Maybe, but first I need to discuss this with my partners. Richard and Jonathan, among others. This isn't a decision I can make alone." Brandon left the room, leaving Michael and Jennifer alone for the first time since her rescue. "Michael, you can't do this," Jennifer whispered urgently. "You can't become part of this operation." "I won't, Jennifer. I'm buying time." "Time for what?" "For rescue. I have friends positioned around this property. They're waiting for the right moment to move. Jennifer seemed relieved but still worried. What if something goes wrong? What if they find out? Then we improvise, but until then, I need you to trust me. I do. It's just, Michael, there are things about this operation you don't know. Yet, things that make everything much more dangerous. What kind of things? They're not just a consulting firm using questionable methods. They have connections to very powerful people, politicians, judges, business people who control entire sectors of the economy. Michael's heart sank. If Jennifer was right, they weren't just dealing with local criminals, but with a much broader corruption network. How did you find this out? Some of the documents I found at the office mentioned names I recognized, people who appear in the newspapers, who make decisions that affect the entire country. Did you manage to take any of those documents? I hid some before I was caught. They're in a safe place. Where? In a safe deposit box at the bank. I left instructions for them to be delivered to the press if anything happens to me. Michael felt a mix of admiration and terror. Jennifer had been far braver and smarter than he'd imagined, but she'd also put herself in much greater danger. Jennifer, if this network is as powerful as you're suggesting, we could both be in permanent danger, even if we get out of here alive. I know. That's why I left those instructions at the bank. If something happens to us, at least the truth will come out. Before Michael could respond, Brandon returned to the room. I spoke with my partners. They're interested in your proposal, Michael, but with a few conditions. What conditions? First, you'll work exclusively for us. No independent clients, no side projects. That's impossible. My firm has existing contracts, commitments. Then you'll transfer those contracts to us, gradually, discreetly, but completely. And the second condition, Jennifer stays with us as collateral for your behavior. If you betray us, she dies. Jennifer paled at this, and Michael felt anger rise in his throat. This isn't a deal, Brandon. This is slavery. Call it whatever you want, Michael. Those are the terms, take it or leave it. Michael realized Brandon had never intended to make a fair deal. He was just toying with them, prolonging the suffering, before the inevitable conclusion. What if I refuse? Then you both die today, it's that simple. And if I accept, how long does Jennifer stay as collateral? Indefinitely, or until we decide you're no longer useful to us. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of cars arriving at the property. Brandon immediately grew alert, walking to the window to see who had come. My partners, he murmured. They're earlier than expected. Michael heard voices outside, recognizing Richard Anderson and Jonathan Reynolds. But there were other voices, two people he couldn't identify. Michael, it seems you'll meet the entire operation today, Brandon said with a sinister smile. My partners wanted to see you in person before making a final decision about your proposal. Or about our execution, Jennifer whispered. Brandon heard her and smiled even wider. Jennifer's always been sharp. It's a shame she chose the wrong side. A few minutes later, Richard and Jonathan entered the room accompanied by two men Michael didn't recognize. One was clearly a politician. Michael had seen his face in the papers. The other looked like a successful businessman, but there was something in his eyes that hinted at a violent past. So, this is the famous Michael Thompson, Richard said. The man who almost destroyed our operation. Almost? Asked Michael. Well, you've caused some trouble, but nothing that can't be fixed, replied Jonathan. Especially now that we'll have you working for us. The politician stepped closer to Michael, studying his face carefully. Mr. Thompson, I'm Senator William Parker. You may have heard of me. Michael had recognized him but pretended otherwise. I don't recall. What a shame. I chair the Economic Development Committee in the State Assembly. My work involves creating policies that affect companies like yours. The implication was clear. The senator was involved in the operation and could use his political position to harm or protect businesses based on his interests. And this is Mr. Vincent Walker, the senator continued, introducing the other man. He handles the more practical aspects of our operation. Vincent looked at Michael with an expression that left no doubt about what kind of practical aspects he managed. Mr. Thompson, Vincent said, his voice low and threatening, I hope you understand the seriousness of your situation. I understand perfectly. Good. Then let's get straight to the point. Brandon told us about your proposal to work with us. It's an interesting offer, but we need more solid guarantees than just your word. What kind of guarantees? First, you'll transfer 40% of your company's shares to one of our subsidiary companies. That will give us legal control over your operations. Michael felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. They didn't just want his information, they wanted his entire company. That's impossible, my company is all I have. Not anymore, replied Richard. Now it's our guarantee that you'll cooperate. And second, Jonathan continued, you'll move into a residence we'll provide. It'll be comfortable but monitored. Essentially, you'll be our full-time employee. What about Jennifer? Jennifer stays with us too, in separate accommodations, obviously. Michael realized they were describing an elaborate house arrest. They'd be kept alive, but never free again. What if I refuse to sign the share transfer? Vincent smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. Then we'll start doing very unpleasant things to Jennifer while you watch, and we'll keep going until you change your mind. Jennifer visibly trembled at the threat, and Michael felt murderous rage building inside him. You're animals, he said through clenched teeth. We're businessmen, the senator corrected. We do what's necessary to protect our investments. How long do I have to decide? None, replied Richard. The decision is now. Sign the papers, or we start hurting Jennifer. Michael looked at Jennifer, seeing the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. She nodded almost imperceptibly, as if telling him not to sacrifice himself for her. But Michael couldn't do that. He couldn't let her be tortured, for his sake. Fine, he said finally. I'll sign. Excellent, said Jonathan, pulling some documents from a folder. We already have the papers prepared. As Michael examined the documents, trying to stall as long as possible, his heart raced. Robert and his team must have been wondering what was happening. How much longer could they wait before deciding something had gone wrong? Here's a pen, said Brandon, handing over an expensive pen. Michael took it, but hesitated before signing. One last question. If I sign this, do you guarantee Jennifer won't be hurt? We guarantee she'll be treated well as long as you cooperate, Vincent replied. And if I stop cooperating? Then she dies. Simple as that. Michael put the pen to paper, but before he could write anything, a loud explosion erupted. Outside the house, everyone in the room immediately went on high alert. Richard ran to the window. What was that? He shouted. I don't know, replied Jonathan, grabbing a pistol from under his jacket. Vincent was also armed now, and Brandon had drawn the gun Michael had seen earlier. It could be the authorities, said the congressman, looking nervous for the first time. Impossible, Richard shot back. No one knows about this place. A second explosion, closer this time, made everyone instinctively duck. Someone knows about this place, Vincent said sharply, and they came well armed. Michael felt a mix of relief and terror. Robert had decided to act, but the situation was clearly turning violent. You two, Vincent barked, pointing at Michael and Jennifer. Stay right where you are. One move, and I shoot. Richard and Jonathan dashed out of the room to assess the situation. The congressman followed, leaving only Vincent and Brandon to guard the prisoners. Who did you bring here? Brandon demanded, his voice thick with anger. No one. I came alone, just as ordered. Liar! Vincent stepped forward menacingly. You set us up. I didn't set anything up. If there's someone out there, they're not people I know. Jennifer looked at Michael with an expression caught between hope and terror. She clearly understood any rescue would be chaotic and dangerous. A third explosion, this time unmistakably inside the house, made the entire building shake. Damn it! Brandon yelled. They're inside! Vincent rushed to the bedroom door and shouted down the hallway. Richard! Jonathan! Status! No response came. We need to get out of here, Vincent told Brandon. Now! What about the prisoners? We take Jennifer, we kill Michael. No, Jennifer screamed. Vincent turned to Michael, raising his gun. It was a pleasure knowing you, Mr. Thompson. But before he could pull the trigger, the bedroom door burst open, and men dressed in black stormed in. "Weapons down, now!" one of them shouted. Vincent hesitated for a split second, just long, enough for one of the men to take him down with a taser shot. Brandon tried to run but was subdued before he took 2 steps. "Michael, Jennifer, are you okay?" Robert called out, appearing in the doorway moments later. "We're fine," Michael answered, helping Jennifer up. "What about the others, Richard, Jonathan, the congressman, in custody?" The operation was a complete success. As Robert's men secured Vincent and Brandon, Michael pulled Jennifer into an embrace, finally allowing himself to feel the relief of being alive and safe. "How did you find the house?" he asked Robert. "We tracked your phone signal before you handed it over. When we lost contact, we decided too much time had passed. The explosions were flashbangs, meant to disorient without causing serious damage." "And how did you get in?" Jennifer had left a back window unlocked when she was captured. Small detail, but it made all the difference. Michael looked at Jennifer with growing admiration. "You planned this?" "I hoped someone would come looking for me. I wanted to make it easier if they did." Robert smiled. "She's smarter than any of us realized." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. In the days following the rescue, Michael uncovered the full scope of the operation that had been dismantled. The evidence gathered by Jennifer, combined with the documents found in the office and the information obtained during the interrogations of the prisoners, revealed a corruption network involving dozens of businessmen, several politicians, and even some judges. The official investigation was conducted by a special task force, as the operation had crossed multiple jurisdictions and involved federal crimes. Michael and Jennifer were questioned extensively, but as cooperative victims and witnesses, they faced no charges. Senator William Parker was the first to be formally indicted, quickly followed by Richard Anderson, Jonathan Reynolds, and Brandon Williams. Vincent Walker, who had a criminal record, faced the most serious charges. But perhaps the most surprising discovery was the revelation that the operation had harmed over 40 businessmen over 3 years. Many of them didn't even know they had been targeted until contacted by investigators. David Miller, the first businessman who had responded to Michael's outreach, became a key figure in building the case against the consortium. His own investigations had documented patterns that corroborated Jennifer's testimony. During this time, Michael made sure to keep Emma and Deborah informed about the developments. They stayed at the hotel for a week until authorities confirmed there were no more threats against them. "Mr. Michael," Emma said during one of his visits, "will Jennifer be okay?" "Yes, Emma. She'll need some time to recover from everything she's been through, but she'll be fine." "And you? Do you still care about her, even though she lied?" Emma's direct question touched on the heart of the issue Michael was grappling with. His feelings for Jennifer were complicated by everything that had happened. "It's complicated, Emma. She lied, but she was also forced to lie. And in the end, she risked her life to do the right thing. So you'll forgive her?" "I already have. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting what happened, but it means choosing not to let anger and hurt control how we treat the person." Emma nodded solemnly. "My mother says forgiving is more for ourselves than for the other person. Your mother is a very wise woman, Emma." During these weeks of investigation and revelations, Michael had plenty of time to reflect on everything that had happened. Emma's courage in speaking up when she saw something wrong had been the catalyst for exposing a massive criminal operation. A 10-year-old child had done something many adults wouldn't have dared. He also thought a lot about Jennifer. His feelings for her were genuine, despite everything. She had been as much a victim as he was, forced to do terrible things to protect her mother. And when she had the chance to do the right thing, she had risked everything. 3 weeks after the rescue, Michael received a call from Jennifer. "Michael, I know you must be busy with everything going on, but I'd like to talk to you." "Of course, Jennifer. Where would you like to meet?" "Actually, I wanted to invite you to come here to Tampa. I want you to meet my mother, and I want to show you who I really am, away from all this horrible situation." Michael hesitated for a moment. Traveling to Tampa would be a significant step in whatever direction his relationship with Jennifer might take. "Jennifer, are you sure you want this, after everything we've been through?" "I'm sure." Michael, I know what I did was unforgivable, but I also know you're a good man who deserves to see the full truth about who I am. Not the persona I created to manipulate you, but the real person. And who is the real person? Come to Tampa and find out. Michael decided to go, partly out of curiosity, partly out of a need for closure, and partly because his feelings for Jennifer hadn't disappeared despite everything. Before traveling, he visited Emma and Deborah one last time. Is Mr. Michael going on a trip? Emma asked. Yes, Emma, to Tampa to meet Jennifer's family. Does that mean you really like her? It means I want to understand my feelings for her, and to do that I need to know her as she really is. What if you find out you don't like the real her? Then at least I'll know the truth, and we can go our separate ways without unanswered questions. What if you find out you like her even more? Michael smiled at Emma's insight. Then maybe we can build something real together based on truth this time. Deborah, who had been listening, stepped closer. Mr. Michael, can I give you some motherly advice? Of course, Deborah. True love isn't about the perfect person. It's about choosing to love an imperfect person perfectly. If Jennifer is a good person who did bad things under terrible circumstances, that doesn't make her irredeemable. And how will I know if she's genuinely a good person? Watch how she treats people who can't do anything for her. See how she handles responsibility when no one's forcing her. Notice if she learns from her mistakes. Deborah's advice echoed in Michael's mind throughout the flight to Tampa. When he arrived at the airport, Jennifer was waiting for him. But she seemed different, more relaxed, more natural, without the calculated artificiality he'd known in New York City. Michael, she said, stepping forward timidly. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. They hugged briefly, an embrace that was both familiar and strange, loaded with history and uncertainty. On the way to Jennifer's house, she told him about her real life. Her mother, Mrs. Catherine, was a retired teacher who had developed a chronic illness requiring expensive treatment. Jennifer had worked as a secretary at several companies, trying to earn enough to care for her mother, but never managing to save enough. That's when I saw their ad, she explained. They promised a lot of money for social work. I was desperate, Michael. Mom was getting worse, and I didn't know what else to do. When did you realize what kind of work it really was? After the first date, they gave me a name, a location, and instructions to make a man interested in me. When I understood what they were asking, I wanted to quit. Why didn't you? Because they already had information about my mother. They knew where she got treatment, where we lived, everything. They made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, she might have trouble with her care. Michael began to understand the impossible situation Jennifer had been in. How long had you worked for them before we met? Almost 2 years. You were the 12th man, like I said. But Michael, you were the first I truly fell for. How can I know that's true? Jennifer stopped the car and looked directly at him. Because if it were a lie, I wouldn't have risked everything to expose them. If it were a lie, I would have followed the original plan and gotten the information they wanted from you. And if it were a lie, I wouldn't have left evidence for you and your friends to find me when I was captured. Michael saw sincerity in her eyes, but doubts still lingered. They arrived at Jennifer's house, a simple but well-kept home in a middle-class Tampa neighborhood. Mrs. Catherine was waiting on the porch, a woman in her 60s with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded him of Jennifer's. Mom, this is Michael, said Jennifer, clearly nervous. Michael, exclaimed Mrs. Catherine, rising from her rocking chair with some difficulty. Jennifer has told me all about you, how you helped her, how brave you were. Actually, Mrs. Catherine, it was your daughter who was brave. She risked everything to do the right thing. Yes, I know, I'm very proud of her. But I also know she did terrible things before that, things that haunted her every night when she came home. Michael looked at Jennifer, who had lowered her eyes, clearly ashamed. She cried every night, you know, continued Mrs. Catherine. She said she was doing horrible work, but it was the only way to help me. I begged her to stop, told her I'd rather die than see my daughter destroy herself like that. Why didn't she stop? Because they convinced her that if she did, I would die. And Jennifer has always been the kind of person who sacrifices herself for others. Over the next 3 days in Tampa, Michael had the chance to see Jennifer in her natural environment. He watched how she cared for her mother, how she interacted with the neighbors, how she treated people who clearly had nothing to offer her. He saw a woman who woke up early every day to prepare her mother's medicine, who knew all the neighbors by name and genuinely cared about their problems, who volunteered at a local school in her free time, helping children with reading difficulties. On the second day, Jennifer took him to visit the school where she volunteered. "This is the part of my life I could never share with you before," she said, "because it wasn't part of the person I was pretending to be." Michael watched Jennifer interacting with the children. There was a naturalness, a genuineness in her movements and expressions that was completely different from the calculated woman he had met in New York City. "Aunt Jen!" shouted a girl of about 7, running to hug Jennifer. "Did you bring your boyfriend?" Jennifer turned red but smiled. "Lily, this is Michael. He's a special friend. He's handsome," Lily said bluntly. "Are you going to marry him?" "Lily!" Jennifer scolded, but she was laughing. Michael crouched down to the girls. "Height. Lily, do you know Jennifer well?" "I do. She teaches me to read every Tuesday and Thursday. And she always brings candy when someone's sad." "Is she a good teacher?" "The best. She's patient and never gets mad when we don't understand something." That afternoon, Michael watched Jennifer working with several children who had learning difficulties. Her patience was endless, her dedication obvious, and the affection the children had for her was genuine. "How long have you been volunteering here?" he asked on the way back. 3 years. I started even before I began working for those people." "And you kept doing it even when you were constantly traveling to New York City?" "Whenever I was home. It was the only thing that made me feel clean after what I did there." Michael began to understand the complexity of who Jennifer really was. She was neither the calculated manipulator he had met in New York City, nor a completely innocent victim. She was a good woman who had been forced to do terrible things, but had preserved her humanity through acts of kindness and service. On the third day, Jennifer took him for a walk on the beach. "Michael, I need to ask you something," she said as they walked along the sand. "What?" "Can you forgive me? Completely, I mean. Not just say you forgive me, but really leave the past behind?" Michael stopped walking and looked out at the ocean for a few moments before answering. "Jennifer, forgiving you was never the question. I've already forgiven you. The question is whether I can trust you again. And can you?" "I think so. These past few days have shown me who you really are. And the person you really are is someone I can trust." Jennifer began to cry. "Michael, I love you. Truly this time. Not as part of a job or manipulation, but because you're a good person who deserves to be loved. I love you too, Jennifer, despite everything, or maybe because of everything we've been through." They kissed there on the beach, and this time the kiss was real, honest, without tricks or manipulation. "So what do we do now?" Jennifer asked. "Now we build something real based on truth, honesty, and genuine love." "And where? You have your life in New York City. I have my mother here. We'll figure it out. Maybe I can open an office here. Maybe your mother can move to New York when she's better. We'll find a solution that works for everyone." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, dreaming of a future that for the first time seemed truly possible. When Michael returned to New York a week later, he had a new perspective on his life and priorities. The first thing he did was visit Emma and Deborah to tell them about his trip. "So are you staying with Jennifer?" Emma asked. "We're going to try, Emma. We'll see if we can build something real together." "I think you can," Emma said confidently. "Because you were both brave when it mattered, and brave people can do anything." "Thank you, Emma, for your courage, your honesty, for everything. Mr. Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Emma. When you get married, can I be the maid of honor?" Michael laughed, touched by the child's sweetness. "Emma, if Jennifer and I get married, you'll be the head maid of honor. Promise?" "Promise." In the months that followed, Michael split his time between New York and Tampa, gradually transferring more responsibilities at his firm to trusted partners, so he could spend more time on the Gulf Coast. Jennifer, in turn, began studying to work in consulting, wanting to contribute to Michael's business legitimately. The trial of the consortium members became a nationally watched event. Senator William Parker was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Richard Anderson, Jonathan Reynolds, and Brandon Williams received sentences ranging from 5 to 7 years. Vincent Walker, with his criminal record, was sentenced to 12. But perhaps more important than the convictions was the case's impact on raising awareness about corporate espionage and romantic manipulation for criminal purposes. Michael and Jennifer were invited to speak at several business security conferences, always emphasizing the importance of staying alert to signs of manipulation. Emma became something of a local celebrity after the story went public. Several newspapers wanted to interview her about her courage in speaking up when she saw something wrong. She always answered with her characteristic simplicity. When we see something wrong, we have to say something. It's that simple. A year after the events that changed their lives, Michael and Jennifer married in a simple ceremony on the beach in Tampa. Emma, as promised, was the head maid of honor. Mrs. Catherine, whose treatment was being paid for by Michael and had significantly improved her condition, gave Jennifer away. During the ceremony, the priest asked if anyone objected to the marriage. Emma raised her small hand. "I have something to say," she announced, much to the guests' amusement. "Go ahead, Emma," the priest encouraged. "I just want to say that Michael and Jennifer are brave people who truly love each other, and their love will last forever because it's built on truth." The guests applauded, and Michael and Jennifer smiled through tears of happiness. After the ceremony, Emma approached the couple. "Now will you be happy forever?" she asked. "We'll try to be, Emma," Jennifer replied. "And if we have difficulties, we'll remember the lesson you taught us." "What lesson?" "That we should always speak up when we see something wrong, including when we see wrong things in ourselves." Emma nodded approvingly. "And if you have children, will you teach them to be brave too?" "We'll teach them to be like you, Emma," said Michael. "Honest, brave, and always willing to do the right thing." 2 years after the wedding, Michael and Jennifer settled permanently in Tampa, where they opened a consulting firm specializing in helping companies protect themselves against espionage and manipulation. The business thrived, not just because of their technical expertise, but because clients trusted people who had lived through the dangers they now helped others avoid. Jennifer developed a special training program for young women on how to recognize and resist manipulation. She spoke openly about her own experience, always emphasizing that good people sometimes make poor choices when desperate, but there's always a way back to the right path. Emma, now 12, remained a constant presence in their lives. She visited regularly with Deborah, who had grown very close to Mrs. Catherine. The two older mothers developed a strong friendship based on their shared experience of raising courageous daughters. During one visit, Emma made an important announcement. "I've decided what I want to be when I grow up," she said at dinner. "What is it, Emma?" Jennifer asked. "I want to be an investigator, to help find people who do wrong things and protect those who can't protect themselves." "That's a noble choice, Emma," Michael said. "You'll make an excellent investigator." "Really? How do you know?" "Because you've already shown the two most important qualities for an investigator," Jennifer replied. "What are they?" "The courage to speak the truth and the compassion to protect others." Emma beamed. "So when I'm an investigator, I'll help many people like I helped you. You'll help even more people, Emma, because now you know one brave person can change many lives." As the evening progressed and the families shared stories and laughter, Michael reflected on how Emma's simple decision to speak up when she saw something wrong had changed so many lives for the better. The consortium had been dismantled, dozens of business owners had been protected from future manipulation, a political corruption network had been exposed, and two people in love had found a way to build a future together based on honesty and truth. But perhaps most importantly, Emma had learned her voice mattered, that she could make a difference in the world. And she taught everyone around her that sometimes the most heroic actions come from the unlikeliest people at the most unexpected moments. 3 years after the wedding, Michael and Jennifer announced they were expecting their first child. Emma was thrilled. "Can I teach the baby about courage?" she asked. "It'll be the first lesson they learn," Michael promised. "And if it's a girl, I'll teach her never to be afraid to speak up when something's wrong." "And if it's a boy?" Jennifer asked. I'll teach him that protecting people is the most important job in the world." 6 months later, Jennifer gave birth to a girl they named Deborah Emma Thompson, after the two most important women in their lives. When Emma saw the baby for the first time, she took little Deborah's tiny hand and whispered, "Hi, Deborah. I'm Emma. I'll teach you to be brave like your mommy and daddy. And when you grow up, you'll help so many people just like they did." 20 years after those events, Emma had become a respected investigator specializing in cases of manipulation and exploitation. She had helped dismantle multiple criminal networks and protected hundreds of victims. Deborah, now a young woman, followed in her parents' footsteps in the consulting field, but also developed a special interest in protecting vulnerable children. She always said her inspiration came from the stories Emma told her about the importance of speaking up when something is wrong. Michael and Jennifer, now gray-haired but still deeply in love, continued their work of helping businesses and individuals protect themselves against manipulation. They often spoke at schools and universities about the importance of integrity in business and relationships. But the most lasting legacy of everything that had happened wasn't in the successful businesses or the criminals brought to justice. It was in the simple lesson Emma had taught everyone. When we see something wrong, we must speak up, no matter how scary or difficult it may be. That lesson had spread through generations, influencing how children were raised, how businesses were run, and how communities protected one another. And it had all started with a 10-year-old girl who had the courage to say, "Sir, she put something in the drink." On a sunny afternoon many years later, Michael, Jennifer, Emma and their families gathered for a special celebration. Emma had just received an award for her years of service investigating crimes against the vulnerable. During her acceptance speech, Emma looked at the audience and said, "When I was 10 years old, I saw something wrong happening and had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent. I chose to speak, even though I was scared. That choice changed so many lives, including mine. Today I want to encourage everyone here. When you see something wrong, speak up. Your voice matters, your courage can save lives, and sometimes the simplest decisions have the most extraordinary consequences." The audience rose in a standing ovation, not just for Emma, but for the timeless lesson she had taught. That moral courage is the most powerful force for good in the world. After the ceremony, as the families gathered for dinner, Deborah, now a young woman, approached Emma. "Aunt Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Deborah." "Did you ever regret speaking up that day at the restaurant, considering all the dangers you all faced afterward?" Emma smiled, looking at Michael and Jennifer, who were chatting animatedly with their grandchildren, surrounded by a loving family that would never have existed if she had stayed silent. "Never, Deborah. Not for a second. Because I learned something very important that day." "What?" "That staying silent when we see something wrong doesn't protect us from danger. It only ensures the danger continues for others. True courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing in spite of it." Deborah nodded thoughtfully. "Is that what you want me to remember when I face my own hard choices?" "I want you to remember that one brave person can change the world, and that person could be you." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching tale of courage and redemption. Do you believe Emma made the right choice by warning Michael? And what do you think about Michael's ability to forgive Jennifer? Share your reflections on this journey of transformation in the comments. If this story moved you as deeply as it moved us, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard.